And eggs are arguably the most ubiquitous animal-based product, but they're produced by a species that is poorly understood by most consumers. Today, I'm speaking with Misha Ross, a postdoctoral fellow in the University of Guelph's Department of Animal Biosciences. He has studied and managed poultry for years and recently published his latest academic paper on environmental enrichment and stress responses in laying hens. Off campus, Misha is a family man and enjoys getting his hands dirty with building and renovations. Misha, thanks for speaking with me today.
Hi, Jacob. Nice to see you again. Thanks for having me.
So, poultry behavior and welfare is a niche field. I personally find it fascinating, but I know that it receives less recognition and less funding than other areas. And you're obviously a busy guy with both your academic and personal pursuits. So, what brought you to the poultry welfare field, and what keeps you writing and publishing about the animals?
All right. Well, I've for a long time been concerned about the ethics of how we treat animals, particularly the suffering we inflict on them. And from this point of view, poultry are very important, just in terms of the sheer number that are being used by humans. It's about 20 billion at any given time on this planet, and also the intensive conditions that they are reared under all over the world, in very cramped, barren environments typically. And also just the conditions in which they are handled at slaughterhouses and in transport. Like, chickens are arguably the most abused animals on this planet. And this is growing every day because people are, like, the poultry industry is rapidly growing. And part of the reason is that humans are facing pressure to reduce our carbon footprint for reasons of climate change. And poultry just happened to be one of the most efficient ways to produce animal protein. So this isn't a problem that's going to go away. And so this is essentially what drove me to study chickens. And also because of my belief that they are underappreciated and disrespected in terms of people's perceptions about their intelligence. So I don't think they deserve enough recognition that they have feelings, they can experience pleasure and pain. So these are the main things that drove me to study poultry in particular.
Right. So building on kind of the public perception of poultry, like you said, I think there's a huge sort of bird brain trope going on, and people never assume that chickens are intelligent. So, kind of how would you respond? Is there any kind of anecdotes or fast facts that you'd use to respond to kind of society's underestimation of poultry in this way?
Well, there are some interesting research findings, but I think there is a lot that still remains to be studied. But yeah, I'd first just like to point out that it's obviously a prevalent misconception that people have, and I think they use that to justify not caring about animals, or the chicken's feelings. And I'd kind of like to preface that idea about intelligence being so important to the ethics of this issue, because really what I think it ultimately comes down to is their capacity to experience feelings like pleasure and pain. And I think that, like, evidence firmly suggests that chickens have those capacities. They can suffer, they can experience pleasurable states. These are the things that are most important for quality of life. But in terms of their intelligence in particular, which intelligence does feed into quality of life issues because it does affect the types of needs that the animal has. And so some quick sort of factoids that you asked for. Yeah, there's just certain capacities that chickens have been shown to have through research. One of those is just associative learning. Like, they are quick learners. They are easy to train, which is useful for the certain types of experiments that are performed on chickens. Chickens have the capacity to do simple logic. They can do something called transitive inference, which, it's a type of logic, which is basically, if you know, how do I explain this? Like, a good way to explain it is through the pecking order. Like a chicken
Yes.
will know if there's a chicken that's dominant over them, and they see another chicken be dominant over that chicken, they will know that that chicken is also dominant over them. They won't go and challenge them in a fight. So that's one example of how chickens can practice logic. Another one is their communication abilities. Chickens have many distinct calls that they use to communicate, and they're not just reflexive signals about how they're feeling. There's actually some intention behind them. Like chickens will signal to each other things like predator threats, and they can even be specific about what type of threat it is. Like, is it an aerial predator? Is it a land predator? And they're not just doing this, calling out in fear. They're actually intentionally signaling to their mates that to watch it.
Yeah.
Those are a couple things. There's more, but that's probably enough.
I'm sure that's just grazing the surface. So moving more towards kind of public perception, in my experience, uninformed consumers are pretty surprised, if not appalled, when they learn kind of exactly what an egg farm using traditional systems looks like. I think in my experience, the most dramatic reaction happens when I tell people, a hen has an amount of space that's, the area of a sheet of paper sort of thing. But research suggests that space is only one part of the equation. So my question is, what are the top 2 or 3 welfare problems in traditional egg production from a scientific standpoint?
Okay, yeah. Well, first, I would just like to reiterate the crowding. It's a major concern from just an animal comfort point of view. The requirements in Canada are 67 square inches per hen currently, which is quite a bit smaller than a sheet of paper. So this restricts their freedom of movement, their ability to do simple things like walking and stretching their limbs. And in other countries around the world, crowding is even worse. In countries like Brazil and China, even though there's not reliable data on that, the data that I've seen show that crowding is worse. And especially in hotter climates, you can run into issues like overheating. In Brazil, for example, I've seen data on how mortality rates can be quite high on cage farms just from overheating during heat waves. So that's an important one. Another one that has received a lot of scientific attention is how battery cages restrict what is known as behavioral needs. These are highly motivated urges that chickens have to perform certain behaviors that they just simply can't do because the cage is a barren environment that has no resources and provides no opportunities to do the things that they are naturally motivated to do. And these include things like foraging, nesting. A hen has a really high motivation to find a secluded spot to lay her egg away from other hens. Perching is another one, and dust bathing. Dust bathing performs a function of keeping their plumage healthy, and hens in cages will do a behavior known as sham dust bathing, where they go through the motions but don't actually achieve the physical results of the behavior. So those are the ones that are widely criticized by the scientific community. And it did lead in, I think the 1980s or 1990s to the development of another cage system that provides some of the resources that allow the hen to do some of those behaviors. And that's a system that's gaining prevalence now in North America. They're called enriched cages.
So, like you say, there are new cage systems. In my experience, cage-free eggs are widely available in grocery stores, at least here in Ontario. But according to my knowledge, I fear that a lot of enriched systems come with their own insufficiencies. So when you have aviaries, enriched cages, free run barns, free range systems, obviously there's a lot of variables at play in each case, but do you think there's one added welfare system that's better than the other ones?
Um, in terms of systems, my personal view would be that a free range system has the potential to provide the best welfare for the chickens, but so much depends on the specifics of how that operation is managed, and so many factors like the stocking density, the group size, the 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 way that the outdoor space is provided. And that's like, for example, is there canopy cover? Chickens find actually open spaces aversive. So just providing them like a field basically won't necessarily mean they'll utilize it. Things like the vegetation in the pasture and so on. So yeah, that system I think has the best potential, but in order to actually achieve that potential, a lot of things need to fall into place. It needs to be well managed. It needs to use the right genetics of bird, and especially in northern climates, certain things need to be done to make sure that the birds can still have some of the same benefits of that outdoor space during the winter months, when it's obviously a lot less suitable for chickens, which are actually a subtropical bird.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that would be my answer. Yeah.
I see. So it seems like there's a lot at play. Like even when you say that free range systems might be the best, it's only that they have the potential to be the best, and it really depends farm to farm. So if it's so complicated, coming from your standpoint, where do you think that leaves consumers? Do you think the current labeling programs, the terminology, like education even, do you think that's sufficient for people to make informed buying decisions when it comes to eggs?
Yeah, like do egg labels provide
Yeah,
enough information to make informed
exactly.
decisions? I'd say firmly no. The customer really needs to do their research before they go to buy the eggs to
Mhm.
know what they're getting. And the free range label is no guarantee of good welfare. And like until recently, it's basically been an unregulated label.
Mhm.
You could have stocking densities that are just as crowded as cage systems, for example, in a free range system. But that is changing for the better in Canada with the new codes of practice, which are what is used. Basically, the industry uses the codes of practice, a scientifically informed set of best practices. They use those to regulate themselves,
Mhm.
and the latest codes do have some stipulations about free range farming, although not a lot.
Right, right. So I guess the present solution, like you say, is for the consumers to do their research before going to the grocery store. Just off the top of your head, if you were kind of to imagine a different sort of system, where maybe with more imagery in the grocery store, or more education, more things about animals in the education system, what do you have any ideas as far as that goes, as far as like a hypothetical solution goes?
Well, one solution, which isn't a hypothetical, but it's just not a very popular or common thing right now, are third party welfare certifications.
Hmm.
And there are at least a couple of those which are available in Canada. One is it's called Animal Welfare Certified, and I think that was originally established through the Whole Foods grocery chain.
Mm.
And there's another one called certified humane.
Mhm.
And the important thing about those is that they are scientifically informed and they are third party certified. So that ensures that there isn't a conflict of interest
Right.
between the certifier and the producer.
Mhm.
And so if the producer meets those standards, then they are entitled to use that logo. So I think that that's a very good system that consumers can look out for, to know that the eggs they're purchasing do come from higher welfare farms.
Mhm.
More of a hypothetical one that I could think of, which I don't think is realistic at all, would be sort of like a warning label on packaging to provide consumers with um, accurate information about the conditions in which the birds
I see.
are reared. I mean, how I don't know how effective that would be because cost is such a primary driver of consumer decision making. But I do think that if the packaging actually were some form of deterrent, that could push people
Yeah.
to produce higher welfare foods.
Yes. Although I wonder, sadly, eggs are not quite as addictive as cigarettes, so people might be scared off. Um, so in addition to your research, you're somebody who owns backyard chickens. Having hens at home, it's obviously easier to provide better welfare than in mass production facilities. Do you think backyard chickens are for everybody or are for most people? Do you think education about and promotion of poultry farming at home should be more widespread?
Um, to answer your question, is it for everyone? The answer is a definite no. I think if people's motivation for backyard chicken keeping is because it's good for self-sustainability, or maybe it's a cheaper way to produce food. I think they're sadly mistaken. It's not cheap, and there's a lot that can go wrong. So it's a financial and time investment. I think the main um, like a reason that I would consider a really good one for backyard chicken keeping would be that people would find it very gratifying to care for the animals,
Mhm.
to observe their behavior, and to put the work in and the money in to give them a good quality of life. So, but for those people, I think it's a really great endeavor, hobby, whatever you want to call it. And it also, I think, has the added benefit that if people are keeping chickens in good conditions where the chickens are able to express more of their natural behaviors, have a higher quality of life, then I think that kind of brings out more of the charisma that chickens can have, which
Right.
is almost completely overlooked by most people. And in that sense, people can kind of be like those chickens can kind of be like ambassadors
Right.
for chickens everywhere. And as more and more people maybe get exposed to chickens in those kinds of conditions, they might think a little more about the types of decisions they make when they purchase food.
Absolutely. Misha, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much again for your time and for your thoughts.
Okay, thanks. It was nice speaking to you.
Of course. I'll just stop recording.